Hello, this is Patrick Leary again with Redline Communications. As I mentioned in the part one, Redline is a developer, manufacturer, and professional services organizations of industrial grade wireless solutions, both proprietary and LTE. So let's talk about our part two of CBRS. So the FCC set these rules again in April 17 of 2015, but something really interesting happened roughly in a few months around that time frame. In spring of 2015, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, among others, but especially those three, both launched for all their general users streaming video services. All of a sudden, and if you look at the charts, they're all over the place. All I have to do is Google them. The trend of traffic on the mobile networks just skyrocketed, right? With all this streaming content. So what had before been a somewhat manageable environment in terms of the capacity constraints that the big carriers faced, especially in urban corridors, dense areas, all of a sudden it was getting crushed, right? They had already been doing a lot of mobile offload onto Wi-Fi systems. I think the number is, and I'm not sure exactly, but last time I checked, something like 80% of traffic was already offloaded. However, their billion-dollar spectrum is still getting crushed, especially in urban areas. So they thought, here's this new band, pretty nice allocation in terms of where it sits, especially if we're doing LTE densification, short-range cells. I don't need to be way down low in the spectrum chart because I'm not trying to go miles and miles. I'm maybe trying to go a couple hundred feet, a couple hundred meters, because I'm densifying my network to layer in capacity. So this 3.5 band, by golly, that's a really nice piece of band. So knowing that, CTIA, which is a Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association and its members, T-Mobile and others, filed petitions to amend the CBRS rules and change the rules. It's a big deal. And then post-election of November 2016, with the change of parties, these guys really saw the opportunity to make the spectrum more friendly to their needs. So they went back to the well and they proposed, hey, let's get rid of this whole census tract idea, right? Unless instead the census tracts are too numerous, it's going to be tough for the FCC to auction these things. And how can we manage it? So let's make bigger sizes. We'll still let GAA users exist in part of the spectrum. T-Mobile didn't even want that. But in any event, we think we can share it with everyone, but we really want big geographic units, right? So that was roughly their proposition. And back and forth, we've gone now since April of 2015. And even the FCC proposed an idea, said, okay, Commissioner O'Reilly, who kind of rides herd at the FCC, at the commission, over this band, the process of this band allocation. He's never been a fan of the census tract issue himself. I've talked to him personally a number of times. A lot of my friends in the industry have, and he's made that clear. That's fair enough. It is a lot of spectrum, or a lot of licenses. 77,000 times 7 seems tough. However, various economists from guys at Stanford and others have shown it's just a matter of scale, and the technology exists to do kind of mass auctions in any number of ways that could easily accommodate the number of licenses. In fact, even the initial FCC proposed notice of proposed rulemaking, they envisioned what they said, quote unquote, eBay-like auction, right? Which would have been kind of an interesting model. And by the way, the auction process still isn't defined, and we'll talk about that later. But in any event, the FCC said, hey, what if we auction these off in PEAs, partial economic area units? That's the smallest geography the FCC has ever auctioned off before. Well, there are 416 PEAs in the country. 416. Put that against 77,000 census tracts, all right? So that alone tells you it would have driven up the cost of these priority access licenses exponentially, right? And not only would it have driven up the cost beyond the, the potential of really anyone but a supra-regional carrier with maybe a huge cable operator like a Comcast or a Charter or a Time Warner, maybe within the capabilities of a Frontier or USL or something like that, but certainly within the financial resources of a Verizon or a T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T. But it would have foreclosed the opportunity for all these other spectrum orphans out there, right? Utilities, especially rural cooperative utilities, DMCs, or APP, American Public Power Association, municipal utilities, or water authorities, or city public safety, or whatever it is, or much less private enterprise, campus environments. It would have completely foreclosed the opportunity to use that spectrum to build private networks, just from a cost standpoint. And then from a practical standpoint, if you're, say, in the oil field and you're operating in a relatively confined area in the Permian Basin, you darn sure don't need a license that's going to cover, a third of a whole state, right? It's not economically feasible. Also, I've always had the theory that if the cellular mobility companies could drive up the cost of the spectrum higher than you or I might pay for IoT services, for example, from a carrier, then they've won, right? Because then the cost benefit thing is, you know what? It's cheaper for me to just pay for the IoT service on a carrier's network than to build my own. So I think that's kind of played into the carriers wanting to have much larger licenses, but that's just my theory. So when that was proposed, Google, the NRTC, UTC, lots of rather powerful lobbying entities, the NTCA, Apple, many others said, whoa, wait a minute here. The millions have already been invested in pre-CBRS equipment that can be software upgradable to full CBRS rules. We've already created an ecosystem. Hey, FCC, you've told industry to create an organization to define the rules. So the industry went and created this organization called the WIN Forum, Wireless Innovation Forum, which spent countless hours defining the rules for how the SAS would work, even such things as what defines use, right? When the SAS should move a GAA user away from a priority access user, all this kind of stuff. Said, we've already invested all this stuff, right? And the whole purpose of this band was to enable all these spectrum orphans in particular to do all this kind of new, interesting stuff, leveraging new technology, leveraging the standard. And they said, no, let's pull the reins back and let's fight for the original rules. Back and forth we've gone. And today we sit with the CTIA having forwarded or endorsed a proposal that would be larger geographic units in urban areas based on MSAs, metropolitan service areas, and then county-sized licenses in more rural areas. That's pretty doable, right? Not so great if you're a large campus environment in an urban area. Your shot is kind of gone. You won't be able to buy a priority access license. It'll be too expensive. But if you're operating in rural areas, like a rural EMC or a pipeline entity or, oil and gas or whatever, some of these places you operate in are pretty darn rural. So and if it's county sized, that's pretty manageable scope of geography where it might be justifiable to buy one of these licenses at auction and probably be able to get it very, very cheaply, right? There's not 77,000 counties, but there are a heck of a lot more counties than there are the 416 PEAs. So I think Georgia has 96 counties or something all by itself, right? So there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of counties. So kind of a workable solution and getting much closer to what's possible. Recently, a counterproposal has been forwarded by Google, NRTC, the Wireless Internet Service Providers Organization, which is a group that definitely punches above its weight and represents more entrepreneurial private wireless broadband service providers in very rural areas. But they proposed a compromise that says, you know what, we'll buy into the MSA thing for urban areas. We'll even buy into the county thing for rural. But of the 7 available priority access licenses, let's set aside 2 of those based on census tracts, right? So not just county. Make sure 2 PALs are available for census tracts everywhere, including urban areas. Now that's very interesting, because what does that do? That satisfies really the need of the mobile carriers to get the spectrum that they want. It potentially offers the ability of a campus-sized entity in urban or elsewhere to perhaps get their hands on a priority access license of a much smaller geographic scope and at a cost point that won't be economically prohibitive. So that's largely where we stand now. And the FCC has been saying everyone's looking on a daily basis to see when this thing gets on the FCC's calendar. But the latest thinking is that the final report and order will come out at some point in probably June, right? So at part 3, I'm going to cover the organizations that are really helping to push this, and what are some of the other things that make this spectrum really special and really unique. If you've stayed with me so far, thanks for watching. I hope you've found it useful. If so, maybe drop a comment in there. Thank you.